Good morning and welcome to Meet the Disruptors, 2 days of free online events exploring key market challenges brought to you by Ditto, the B2B tech marketing practice. Thank you for joining our panel discussion, Meet the CWSI team. To start the morning, we'll be meeting the CWSI leadership team to explore the hot topic of the moment, remote working, and how they help firms implement secure mobile working policies, enabling their teams to be productive and compliant, not just when working from home, but anywhere from any device. I think more than ever now, work is an activity, not a place. So we've got a mixture of slides and animation today to take us on our journey. But first, let me start with some introductions. I'm Mike Wilson. I'm the founder and CEO of Ditto, and I have the pleasure of moderating today's session. I'm joined this morning by Philip Harrison, CTO and co-founder of CWSI, by Guido Marchetti, Mobile and Security Solution Sales at CWSI, Paul Lyne, Commercial Director at CWSI, and Michaela Glynn, COO of CWSI. So first of all, just a little bit about me. I've spent 30 years working in the sharp end of finance, tech, and media. I've been based in Asia, the US, and Europe, and I started off actually as a computer programmer and software in Malaysia with Arbat and Winter Partners. Then I spent some time in Wall Street with Bankers Trust and latterly in Deutsche Bank. We founded Ditto in 2008, and we're a marketing communication practice dedicated to financial and emerging technology. I'm delighted now to hand over to Philip, CTO and co-founder of CWSI. Philip, would you give just an introduction to yourself, please, Philip?
Sure. So my name is Philip Harrison. I'm the co-founder and CTO of CWSI. My background is in traditional IT architecture and IT managed services, but today I look after technology strategy, the professional services team, and information security at CWSI.
Thank you very much. And I'm passing over to Guido.
Good morning, Mike. Guido, as my name and my history is, I have about 16 years experience working across various different technologies, from infrastructure, from security, from productivity, across companies ranging from SME all the way up into enterprise. And then also I spent a number of those years working with telcos across Europe, helping them train their salespeople and actually try.
And Paul, over to your good self.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, so my name is Paul Lyne. I'm Commercial Director with CWSI. I've been with the business just about 3 years now. I've got about 15 years experience in the technology and telecommunications markets in a broad range of commercial roles, both in the UK and overseas in Australia and New Zealand. And I'm responsible for our product offer and our service offer, our pricing, and all of our marketing.
Super lovely. And then Michaela.
Hi, Mike. I'm Michaela Glynn. So I've worked in the telecoms and IT industry for nearly 20 years. I started with CWSI when it was founded 9 years ago. So it's been an extremely exciting journey to see how the remote working landscape and security has changed. I'm currently head of operations and people experience, and I've responsibility for operational aspects of the business, which include people experience, employee engagement, and customer facing areas such as service desk, project management, and extraordinary customer touch points. I have a lot of experience in service design, service delivery, and customer success across our channel partnerships and direct customers.
Oh, thank you very much, Michaela. Look, I'm thrilled to be moderating this session this morning, and we've got the whole kit and caboodle. We've got CTO and co-founder, tech, sales, and operations. As a real pleasure. So just a quick note to the audience, this webinar is being recorded, and you can enter any questions you have in the little chat GoToWebinar side panel. We'll be stopping this session roughly about 10:40, at which point we're going to go across to our digital hangout. So if you fire up a separate browser and fire in ditto.tv/mtd, Meet the Disruptors, you'll be able to meet the panel there. And I'm also joined online by my colleague, Jonathan. Hello, good morning, Jonathan.
Hello, everyone.
And Jonathan is on the sliders and faders, and if you send in any questions, he can take that, and he'll also be taking us through how to get to the Meet the Disruptors. So let me just quickly explain the format. I'm going to give a short overview of the topic, and then we'll have a chat with the folks about the founding story of CWSI, their journey to today. Then we'll get a behind the scenes of enterprise mobility management and their solutions. We'll also discuss some of the problems they're solving for their clients, their impact their solutions are having on employees. There will be a time, as I say, for audience Q&A, so do fire them in if you've got them, and then the panel will then sum up with a closing comment for each of them before we head over to the digital hangout. So it is definitely the topic of the moment, remote working. Here we are today, remote working in different places. Now, I'm sure everyone is very familiar with internet technology, bandwidth. If we get anything crunchy during the call, I'll do my best as moderator to step in and try and move things along. But so just bear with us if we do have any kind of glitchy problems on the interweb, as I'm sure we've all experienced that while in these unprecedented times we're working through. So let's talk about remote working. So managing remote teams is no longer seen as a short-term or temporary obstacle, I guess, to overcome. It's a new baseline for how people operate. And those who saw remote working as a niche activity are now maybe likely playing catch up as they work how to scale up their mobile process in a way they can sustain their business for the foreseeable future. Business are learning exactly what they can and can't achieve effectively working away from the office, as well as what fundamental changes to infrastructure and management are needed for this new reality of work. So today we're going to explore how remote working and mobility has changed in the enterprise, the necessary investments needed to secure business, security being ever more prevalent, I think, and data particularly, and how CWSI help firms work from anywhere on any device. And I think we got the whole kit and caboodle here. We got technology, the business, the founders, and sales and operations. So let's start. Next slide, please. So Phil, Michaela just touched like it's the founding story 9 years ago. I think share with our audience, just what inspired you to go away and form CWSI, the genesis of it, and the founding story of it. I think it would be super to share with our audience.
Sure, yeah. So the company was founded back in 2010 by myself and a couple of business partners. And if you think back then, the iPad had just launched, and people were bringing iPads and some iPhones wanting to access company email. So the original purpose of the business was all about how would you secure these smartphones and tablets in an enterprise setting, because at the time, really BlackBerry was the only way of doing that. And I think it's fair to say the user experience wasn't ideal. So and then once users got email on their smartphones and tablets, they wanted to access other things like files and SharePoint sites. So our offering kind of evolved into providing a suite of mobility solutions.
So this is like, for a lot of our audience, Phil, this is going back to the old days of bring your own device. So a lot of, I guess, senior folk were getting iPhones because they wanted to have all of the media and the apps, and we're saying to their technology colleagues, make this work in this interval, so I got to carry 2 devices. Could you maybe just frame for some of our audience, kind of recapping that kind of BYOD days?
Yeah, I mean, it was exactly as you described. Yeah, when we were engaging with clients back at that time, you were really talking about the board directors and maybe senior managers who had been given iPhones for Christmas or iPads for Christmas, and were bringing them in. They hadn't really kind of pushed down through the enterprise yet, compared to how we're at today. Yeah, so they were consumer devices, often owned by the end user, not by the company. But they were people who had the sway to say, I want this device to have my company email on it, figure it out. And that's really where we came in at the time.
And your own journey with CWSI, so kind of starting from that great kind of footing of iPod and iPhone, did you find much resistance when you were going into the enterprise? Why were people early adopting this stuff, or just some sense on what was the in to firms then switching onto this?
Yeah, I'd say there was plenty of resistance, because it's interesting, but just kind of before the company started, and the reason we decided to form it was, in our previous lives, we were often being brought in to argue the case about why iPhones shouldn't be allowed in enterprise, and why.
Oh, so this isn't poacher from Gamekeeper, Phil, is it?
Yeah, exactly. So you could see that things are changing. The position wasn't sustainable, and there were credible kind of mobile device management solutions becoming available, and so we saw an opportunity to take those to market. And yeah, exactly as you say.
Now, my own story with CWSI is that I had the pleasure of being on the board of mentors for Enterprise Ireland's City Insight program, which you guys won. But maybe just explain for some, I think sharing, there's a lot of entrepreneurs dialing in today, a lot of folk founders as well, just your own journey developing a firm from in Ireland, but you've got huge clients all over the world and great clients in the UK. Just that journey of corporate development over the last 10 years, and you're a decade in now, Phil.
Yeah, no, it's been an exciting 10 years. As you said, we won that City Insights program. We, in maybe our 3rd year, we came 3rd in the Deloitte Tech Fast 50, and made it into the Tech 500 in Europe as well. We've had kind of very successful funding rounds over the years. So, you know, we had some great investors support the company as we've gone along. So yeah, no, it's been exciting 10 years.
Super. So we pulled down the next slide here. Next slide, please, Jonathan. Just to have a bit of fun with it, because I think here, I think Michaela said it too, when you were starting off as the pioneers, you've now become not the establishment, but it's like the world has caught up. So here, it's just a Gartner survey reveals that 74% of folk intend to shift some employees to remote working permanently. There is a clearly an enormous shift in response, obviously, to Corona. But just maybe just touch on the behavior you're seeing in the marketplace and to what this shift means both for you and your clients.
Yeah, well, I suppose if I think about for ourselves first, I think we're an interesting use case ourselves. We've been very lucky that because of the area we operate in, you know, from day one, we had a sort of a mobile first attitude to our IT infrastructure. So lots of our users worked remotely the vast majority of time. So when COVID-19 hit, we were more or less able to kind of just lock the office and walk away. That's not to say that we haven't had challenges. You know, I think the jumping from conference call to conference call is exhausting for people, and sourcing hardware has been difficult to push. Yeah, I think by planning for mobile first from day one, I think we've been lucky. And I think most of our clients, because we've been working with them, are in a similar position where they've already got what they need, and it was just a matter of scaling it out to more of their users in the business.
And I know your colleague Paul talks about work being an activity, not a place, and how yes, people were prepared in terms of having some form of mobile strategy in place, but not prepared for the unprecedented, market-wide lockdown we're going through. So I think that tees up nicely for our first question to open up to the panel. So next question. I think, look, congratulations, a decade in. Is there a particular successful client project you'd like to highlight, and why would you? And Philip, I'm going to stick with you for this first question to kick this off. Successful client project you'd like to highlight, and why?
Yeah, so the one that kind of jumps to my mind is actually a series of projects with a particular client. So there's a global food services client that we began working with actually back at the very start of the company. So the first project we worked on was all about designing and implementing a solution to allow their sales team use iPads when they're going out to sell their products to you know, the little bread shops and stuff around Europe. So the idea was, before they showed up to the next shop they were going to visit, they could look on the iPad and see sales metrics from SAP and see, you know, this customer's been buying more baguettes or less croissants or whatever it might be, and you know, go into that customer informed. And then when they got there, they'd have a product catalog that isn't, you know, a sort of a booklet of blurry photographs of their products. It's actually a high definition image on an iPad. And what's particularly interesting this time in general is they're very concerned about their IP. So their IP is their recipes, and if they were to lose those, it would be problematic. So I think the interesting aspect of this project was they wanted to give access to all these back-end systems, but you know, do it securely on mobile. So after that project, then with the same client, we moved into implementing rugged devices in their factories, so to kind of handle inventory management. And again, security was front and center for that. And then after all of those two projects happening, they wanted to use the same management solution that we'd be using the whole way along, and the same security layers to implement access for email contacts and calendars for their knowledge workers. You know, so it was pure remote working the whole way along. It was all about enabling remote workforces. So Michaela might just talk briefly about how we handled the adoption aspect of that last project, so that kind of roll out to knowledge workers across North America.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Philip. So I suppose what we find is a lot of the times companies can have challenges with availability of internal IT resources to concentrate on the adoption of new products or ways of working within their workforce. So generally we can take over that element and work with the end users to get enrolled and increase the overall adoption on the product. So in most cases, we find that there's a piece of upfront reporting and analysis required to cleanse out the data in companies around what their user profiles are, what persona they are they still with the company, what kind of device they're using, and what region they are in. I suppose the key thing is we also take over and manage the messaging to end employees around why they are moving to a particular technology or way of working. And our team don't express any opinions on why those decisions have been made, which can make it much easier then for external people to deliver those messages to internal users. I suppose success at times can be more about the messaging and communication than the actual technology itself. So I suppose as we work through these projects, we get learnings from each of them and implement them then on the next one about ways of working and communication and adoption.
Oh, that's fabulous, Michaela. I mean, I'm just making some notes here too, Michaela. Congratulations. I mean, it's all the P's, from pads to production line to a platform for employees. I mean, super stuff, isn't it, from road warriors all the way through. Well, I'm sure what a great use case as well. I'm sure folks, if anyone of our audience wants to find more about this use case, I know that their inboxes are always open, or just pop an email through and the guys will give you that material, and all the show notes and the show will be published after today's event too. So that brings us nicely along to our next panelist. Guido. So Guido, we're going to talk a bit more about the platform here. You're going to maybe introduce the concept of enterprise mobility and a little bit look behind the scenes at CWSI. So Guido, take it away.
Thanks, Mike. I'll try to do all of that as succinctly as I possibly can. So as you heard Philip and Michaela talk about, CWSI were born in a mobile world, and it's really part and parcel of the DNA of the company. And as such, what we do is we work across a number of technology partners and vendors, and we view ourselves as solution providers rather than sellers of product specifically or platforms. So what we try to do is we try to engage with all of our clients to understand the challenges that they face as a business. We try to understand the IT systems that they use to access their data, to deliver their productivity services, and what they interact with on a day-to-day basis. And then more importantly, the type of device that they want to interact with those services, right? So when we look at that device type and we start to understand what the clients want to do, that then starts bringing us into different ecosystems. So we find ourselves working across iOS, Android, Mac, and indeed Windows 10, helping people work the way that they want. And what we tried. Sorry,
yeah, sorry,
go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, good, Guido, just have a chat about that. I mean, being on from Phil's piece, I mean, it was very device driven in the beginning, wasn't it? iPads and iPhones. But actually, just to explore there, now you're saying, okay, it's kind of have any device you want, you know, to make this enterprise ready, it needs to cater for everything. Just maybe just explore some of the challenges that you solve out for clients by doing that.
Yeah, so an awful lot of the time we see that customers, as Philip said, they started to look at these smart devices coming in, and as you pointed out, an awful lot of the time it was the bosses coming in saying, I want that to work. and as you got email down to it, which was a significant challenge at the time, as Philip highlighted, then they wanted more on it. And of course, with the advent of cloud computing, as we've seen, it has become easier now to connect these type of devices, and more and more then we're also seeing people are now beginning to work across various devices. So with the advent of cloud, and in particular things like G Suite, Office 365, people are now looking for the same experience across all of their devices. So these are things that we're now heavily engaged with. And what it's also brought us is while we started with a very MDM focused conversation, which is something I know Philip will talk about probably later, we now see a shift to unified endpoint management, where people now realize having one pane of glass to look at your entire device estate will be something that will be hugely useful. And we boil everything back down then to helping them understand a more modern security posture, where people can work how they want to and where they want to on any device that they choose to do so.
So you've touched on some great single pane of glass, you know, security posture. If you go to the next slide, please. So I know we prepared some further thoughts here of just the landscape that people are working through. So maybe just explain. I know we're going to talk on 5G in a moment and the ways 5G will shape the future of enterprise mobility. Maybe just explain, what does a single pane of glass view mean for folk, Guido?
So a single pane of glass view will be having a dashboard or a unified endpoint platform, of which we deal primarily with 3 of them, all of which you will find in a Gartner Magic Quadrant, and they generally tend to sit in the leaders one. So whether it's Mobile Iron, whether it's Workspace ONE, or whether it's the Microsoft alternative of Intune, they all work together to bring all of your devices under management so that you've got one central pane of glass where you can then look at tying that into potentially your usernames and passwords. So you're bringing now your identity piece into your device piece, and then you're creating what we call, and what we talk to our customers about, is their zero trust platform for connectivity into their services.
Super. Now, I know, you know, you're a business that never stands still, and a sector that never stands still, and is constantly driving new technology. And I know that you wanted to share what 5G means for business. So, and just your thoughts on both the adoption of this, and again, what it will mean for the future of enterprise mobility when you think about security and zero trust and functionality.
I think in terms of 5G and the potential impact of that, connectivity has always been the underlying challenge of mobile working. And I think as we've seen evolutions of the connectivity, as 5G comes in, it's going to open up quicker and more seamless access to services. And I think as that connectivity starts to double, I think it's not mad to think that some people might start to leverage 5G as a potential primary way of connecting. So we may now start to see devices that will, laptops and other type devices that will have that connectivity built in, and thinking about how you're allowing that connectivity come back into your environment will be part and parcel of building out your secure solutions, looking at ways of making sure that that connectivity isn't compromised in any way, shape or form, and it is controlled and I suppose, if you would, streamlined, so that we know exactly what's going on. I can see big changes with 5G. I can see more adoption of the likes of the service that we're using now. It wouldn't be bananas to see someone do that as they're commuting on a train. Whereas today, I think they have connectivity challenges. So I think it's going to be an interesting time.
Yeah, and I mean, coming to technology, just, you know, our insatiable demand for data and for connectivity. You know, we talked here about apps running faster and more smoothly. I just want you to touch on apps and cloud services and the edge, because I know you're an enthusiastic evangelist when it comes to innovation, and just touch on what that will mean for businesses and workflow in the future.
So I think as things start to change, I think people are going to realize, as they adopt more and more cloud services, when we think about the edge, we think about devices as the edge. We think about the devices as the edge of the corporate perimeter or the enterprise perimeter now. Whereas in the past, you would have looked at the firewall as the edge. That's not the case. It's now the devices. So whether it's iOS, Android, Mac, or Windows 10, we now view those particular platforms as the edge. And I suppose as we move forward, we're seeing more of a focus on making sure that that edge is integrated back into that centralized platform for management. It's integrating and verifying identity as part and parcel of security posture. And also, we're aware of the apps that people are using from those devices. And as we become aware of apps, we are looking then to make sure that they are in line with our security posture, that we may be delivering, where possible, single sign-on across those. Where possible, we're controlling apps on the devices so that we can prevent data from moving from a business app into a personal app, or likewise, we start to factor in what data leakage prevention looks like at the edge. We start thinking about all of these particular scenarios to make sure that our customers have got the security posture that they wish to have.
Super. Well, it leads us nicely, Guido, into the next panel question. So, look, we've heard from Philip and Michaela, you know, the wonderful story of from pads to production line to a platform for employees. But we're all technologists. We know there's sometimes very challenging clients, very challenging with technology. And there's a particular client project or a challenge that was difficult and learnings to share. And I think maybe I'd like to hand it over to Paul to kick off answering that question. Paul, maybe share with our audience one of the ones that were difficult and why.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, I think I'm going to refer back to some of the challenges that Guido referred to there in his piece. So what we're seeing is customers, and one customer in particular is a good example of this, having trouble adapting to this modern way of managing devices from a more traditional approach. And to bring that to life, I'll give you an example of a client we're working with who has 55,000 laptop devices that they're issuing globally to their employees. Now, traditionally, all of those laptop devices have been managed and updated from a security perspective when they come into the corporate network. But of course, at the moment, those devices are not accessing or entering the corporate network. People are not taking those devices into the office. They're not plugging into the local area network. So there's a massive challenge there in how do you even issue fairly straightforward things like a security update to these devices when they're out there in the wild, let's call it. And there is a solution to that, and the solution is what Guido touched upon. It's this unified endpoint management approach. You know, it's using these new platforms to be able to manage these devices wherever they are. But I think what we're seeing at the moment is a lot of organizations are maybe stuck in a bit of a halfway house between traditional management methods and modern management methods, and they're having to manage this kind of hybrid situation, and that's proving challenging for quite a few of the organizations we're working with.
Well, thank you very much. I mean, it's with this kind of hybrid, so is the best and the worst of all worlds. And just return to you, Guido, I'd love for your take on this as a CTO, this kind of hybrid and the best and the worst of all worlds, and some learnings you'd like to share with that.
Was that for Philip or myself? Because you referenced
yourself,
CTO.
Guido. Sorry, back to yourself, Guido.
Yeah, no, that's fine. So I see some challenges in that space, and I think what the example there that Paul shared with us is a classic example of where elements of your infrastructure may have started to modernize, but other components of it haven't, and they've stayed in this I suppose traditional configuration, and we're seeing that realization dawn on people. I think particularly with COVID-19, people's best laid business continuity and business disaster recovery planning really got stringently tested, because I think we all assumed that the office that we go to, if that wasn't available, there would be another available. All right. So we always work in the assumption that we can go to another place. And I think that's been upended with the experience that we've had with COVID-19, which has then highlighted some of those challenges where we jumped into a more modern platform for maybe collaborative tools, yet we didn't make the same jump with our edge devices and the devices that we try to connect in with those. So now we're beginning to see substantial frailties when it comes to security posture based on that.
Yeah, and I think, you know, that's going to be, I know chatting earlier, it's a more prevalent, it's going to come through later, I think, with regulation and audit and compliance. It's super. Well, I can't believe we're already halfway through our panel. So I'd like to turn to the next slide, please, and invite our next panelist to the forum, Paul. Paul, you know, have a chat. I mean, I'd like to kind of double down on your work with the clients, the problems you're solving them. Who do you solve them for? Give some more color to that, please.
Certainly, Mike. So I think we describe what we do at CWSI as securing the modern workplace. You probably picked up on some of those themes from what some of the team have been saying this morning. What does that really mean? It really means enabling organizations and employees to do whatever they need to do within their business from any device, from anywhere, and to be able to do that securely. So what we do is quite focused. We're not IT generalists, you know, we're not into a real broad spread of IT services. We're very focused on what we do. And because of that, we tend to do it for a fairly broad range of customers across lots of different verticals. You've heard a couple of examples this morning already. Big food services business. We work for major banks, we work for airlines, we work for retailers, we work for government bodies, both central and local. So it's cross-vertical, but I think the key thing is that whoever we work for, they do share some important characteristics. And the first one of those is, to use an industry buzzword, they're all driven by some kind of ambition to have digital transformation within their business. I don't really like buzzwords, so you know, what does digital transformation mean? Well, to us, it's really about using technology to make their users and their business more responsive for their customers, more engaging for their employees, and ultimately more profitable for their shareholders. So all of the organizations we work with are driven by that ambition. And secondly, they all take security extremely seriously. for a number of reasons. It could be because of the types of business they operate in, so they may be holding lots of sensitive, say, personal information. In the case of, say, a government body, they could be holding lots of sensitive commercial data, or they could be regulated by an external third party. So in terms of the types of clients we work with, a broad spread, but they all share those characteristics.
And you talk a lot of, Paul, previously about, I love this, how clients stay relevant, how do they close business remotely, how can your sales force be closed business when you're not in the room? So maybe just talk about a little about the problems you're solving out for kind of, those folk who are out on the road, who are working and selling, working with clients, and the type of solutions you can help them with.
Yeah, I'll give you a very simple example of one solution we work with, just one part of our portfolio. And that's really geared around enhancing the connectivity experience for users when they're on the road, when they're mobile, when they're traveling, or when they're working from home even. And what that does is it enables them to have a much more controlled experience from a bandwidth perspective when they're using real-time communication tools like, for example, Teams or Zoom, or any of the other video conferencing solutions that have grown so rapidly recently. And what does that mean for them and for their clients? I mean, I guess you mentioned it at the start of this webinar. We get glitches. Things don't always work as smoothly as we'd like. What these kind of tools do is they try and minimize the chances of that. So it gives you the best possible chance of having a productive conversation with your client that runs smoothly, that's not frustrated by technical issues. That means you can focus on the job at hand, whether that is providing them with the best possible customer service or selling them another product or solution. So that's just one simple example of some of the tools we work with to help people in the current situation.
And I guess the reality, I mean, like your, Paul, everyone's diaries at the moment. I mean, my diary is banjaxed. I don't think I've ever attended as many meetings. And also, there's no excuse to be late for a meeting. And I've now become a master of the 30-minute meeting. Before you sit in a foyer, maybe with a nice coffee, there was some kind of pleasantries at the beginning. But it seems that people are getting down onto it straight away. And I'm sure everyone else has seen there's a huge increase in volume in data and meetings. And now, I know you prepared a nice slide for us next. Next slide, please. And this is about, you talked about security, personal data, and we've all heard a case of Jeff Bezos' phone being hacked and the security risk that comes with mobility. Can you just maybe explain for us how the risk landscape has changed with increased mobile adoption, and maybe even how our assumptions about security are flawed?
Yeah, that's a great question, Mike. I think people look at the Jeff Bezos example and think, how does that happen to someone in his position? And it just, to me, it goes to prove that it doesn't matter how much money you've got, and even if you've got probably access to the best cybersecurity specialists in the world, there's no guarantee that this kind of thing is not going to happen to you. And I think for me, it really illustrates probably three key dynamics that we're seeing within cybersecurity at the moment. The first of those is the blurring of this line between the personal and the professional. If you think back to the Bezos example, that was actually his personal WhatsApp account that he was using on a mobile device. How many executives have a personal WhatsApp account on their device? Probably a reasonable number. That's not an enterprise grade tool. And those devices are often contain sensitive corporate or commercial data. So from a security perspective, managing this blurring of the personal and the professional, while still being able to afford some level of privacy to your employees or your users, I think is the first big kind of theme and challenge we're seeing, which is illustrated here. The second is that people's behavior is still a key factor. And often people, it's a cliche, but people are often still the weakest link.
Yeah,
so if you think about how you behave,
download the app, don't do the thing you're not meant
exactly,
to do.
Yeah, and you're working on maybe on a small mobile device. Your attention is maybe divided. You're multitasking. You're doing something else at the same time. You're less focused on what's going on, and you're just less aware of some of the risks that are around on those types of devices. Everybody's aware of the email the dodgy email these days. Fewer people are aware of the dodgy SMS or the dodgy WhatsApp message or chat message. And then I think the third trend that this is illustrative of is something that Guido touched on, which is this move to a more decentralized approach to security, away from that fortress mentality. Devices and users are now at the edge, and organizations have to think about protecting their data wherever it is, because often you don't know where that data is.
Well, look, I know for a lot of our audience here, whether they're working in regulated firms at banks or unregulated firms, security and being protected is front and foremost of the minds. And please do get in touch with Paul, because we've got some great case studies around this increase of risk of security, from cyber to physical to making yourself safe. Now, I've got my third panel question. Next slide, please. Is there a particular? Next slide, please. Folks, drop in any questions into the chat room there. I know we've got some questions coming in. Do drop them in there, and Jonathan will spin through those. I'm conscious of time too. So is there a particular client, project, or technology aspect that you're currently working on that's exciting, and what's coming down the line? So I think I'm going to return back to Phil. Phil, quick snappiness, what's coming down the line? What should we be keeping an eye out for?
Yeah, so the thing that excites me most, I suppose, and it's already been mentioned earlier, is unified endpoint management, or UEM. So it's been a bit of an aspirational concept for quite a few years, but it really is now enterprise ready. And I think to me, the idea of being able to manage all of your devices, whether they're smartphones, tablets, or desktops, from a single console is a great leap forward for IT admins. It's great for users because they can see all of their devices in a single app and they get a consistent experience across the devices. But kind of close to my heart, UEM is great for security, because you can have one place where you apply your policies and controls to all of your endpoints, and you can very quickly see from one place whether your devices are compliant, all your devices. So this makes
so it's like really super smart single sign-on for devices.
Well, yeah, well, single sign-on is one piece of it, but it's even just kind of compliance. Are all your devices encrypted and secure? You don't want to go into 3 consoles to figure that out.
Brilliant. And I think I'd like to turn to Guido for your take on the same question, please.
I like, Mike, when we take all of the good work that we do with the UEM platform, and then we also integrate it into an identity and access platform. And when we then tie the two together, we can then achieve what we would classify in the industry as that zero trust security posture, where we can set conditions for access into certain elements of your infrastructure. So if the device isn't known, trusted, compliant, if it's not adhering to the settings that Philip and the team are talking about when they talk about device health, etc., and it's not known and linked to an identity, well then quite simply it's not getting into the environment.
Fabulous. So I'd like to turn to my final guest on my panel, Michaela. Michaela, often priority for enterprise and mobility solutions is productivity, and the benefits to employees can sometimes be overlooked. So maybe I'd like to you share with our audience the benefits of mobility for employee well-being. And I know you wanted to touch on the reboot program, some other pieces here, so I'm delighted to hear your tale.
Yeah, sure, Mike. And thanks. I suppose firstly, it's very important to mention that the remote working most people are experiencing now is not normal remote working. Some of our employees are at pains to tell me that every week. So we've people at home with partners or children, multitasking at much more than just work. And I suppose in my view, COVID-19 can be seen as a massive forced corporate experiment in remote working. Happened very quickly. Overnight, with employers and employees not being ready for it from both a technology and a psychological perspective. Everyone knows there are huge benefits for employee well-being when you have a better work-life balance, and being more mobile enables us to be more productive, definitely. And it's been mentioned here a couple of times, what we say in CWSI is work is an activity and not a place. And of course, we hear the horror stories of people commuting to large cities for a number of hours every day, and by not doing that, of course, you have more time for your family, friends, and exercise. I suppose it's important from an employee point of view to become focused and disciplined in regards to your working day, and to ensure you create a cognitive shutdowns, you know, to end your day. I think this was a huge struggle for most employees in the initial weeks of the pandemic, and especially if you weren't used to working from home. And it's key that, you know, remote working was never designed for employees to work, you know, 20 plus more hours per week. Which I think a lot of people felt in the initial weeks of the pandemic was, you know, I'm working remotely, but I'm working much longer hours every day. So it's very important, you know, we help employees to understand how to start and end their day while we're going through this. And I think as things are easing now, that's, you know, people are getting much more disciplined at that.
Super. I know on the next slide, please, we've got some folks you want to share here around tips for remote employee well-being, and you touched it there about productivity isn't about throwing more hours at it, it's about better problem solving, and that this isn't kind of remote working as remote working the extreme. I just wanted to maybe share some of your insights with our audience on remote employee well-being, please, Michaela.
Yeah, sure. So I suppose we've talked a little bit about overwhelm. You mentioned it there, Mike, yourself, of, you know, rolling from meeting to meeting. You know, so you know, it's about managing that. And I think as restriction, and I suppose when we were in the midst of lockdowns, you know, there was nowhere else to go. So, you know, we had employees saying to us, well, sure, I have nothing to do tonight, so I'll just work a few extra hours and I'll get something done. Even though as an employer, we weren't asking them to work more hours. You know, people had changed their working patterns. So we'd, you know, companies have more people starting earlier in the day because they're trying to, you know, manage schedules with children between, you know, partners and households. So very much about, you know, it's okay to turn off your notifications. It's okay to schedule in your lunch break. You know, there's nothing wrong with scheduling it and making sure you take it. And also, you know, making sure you're getting exercise. You know, because we all know a better mental health leads to, you know, better work-life balance and better productivity. And, you know, employers need to help employees to do that. You know, we never ask people to work longer hours. We never ask people to answer emails when they started coming at 7 if, you know, their start time was 9. So it's very much getting the balance between the employer and the employee to make remote working work for both parties.
That's fabulous. And Michaela, if you go to the next slide, please. I know you some key learnings to share here from an industry perspective you'd like to share. I know we've touched a few of them to this point now, but maybe I'll just return to you, Paul, for just a quick 30 seconds on a quick industry perspective, and then I'm going to return to you, Michaela. Then we're going to wrap it up here, folks, and take it to the digital hangout. So just, Paul, 30 seconds from an industry perspective on COVID and lockdown.
Yeah, I think that the situation currently has really tested organisations' business continuity plans, and for me, I think the focus should be, as Phil touched on, working from anywhere, not just working from home, but working from anywhere. You know, if you can facilitate that within your business for the longer term, you know, it's going to bring a lot of benefit. We know that flexibility is the second highest ranked benefit from employees after salary. So the long-term benefits of putting in place something like that are clear.
Fantastic. And Michaela, yourself, one final comment on COVID and lockdown from an industry perspective you'd like to share?
Yeah, sure. So I believe there's still a place for the office, but on a much smaller footprint. There are definitely people who like to separate work from home life, and there are those that may not have the means to work from home long term. You know, in a lot of cases, houses aren't designed as office space, especially for multiple people to be working out of. And then there's also those that like the social element of an office. And I think the pandemic brought other social and psychological challenges for employees, which have alleviated as lockdown rules have eased. However, it will continue to be important for people managers to understand how to manage remote workers and spot the signs when, you know, people are struggling or becoming disengaged. I think a lot of business struggled with the trust factor of remote working, and for for me, remote working, the success of remote working really is trust. Along with technology enablement, you know, trust is as big a piece of the pie as technology enablement, and I think, you know, that's sort of areas for people to focus on going forward.
Fabulous. So I'm going to take us over in a moment to the digital hangout, and we'll take our audience Q&A there. So we know I've got some great questions coming in. So folk, if you bang on the next slide, please, next slide, just so folk can get this. Yeah, folk, if you fire up a new browser, put in ditto.tv/mtd, you'll be able to meet Michaela and Paul and Phil and Guido there, and they'll be delighted to hang out with you, answer your questions. But before we leave here, everything's been recorded. It'll all be sent out online. I'm just going to pass over to my wonderful panel for 30 seconds each for a closing statement before we head out to the hangout. So I'm going to start with yourself, Michaela. 9 years ago, went on the journey with CWSI. 30 seconds from today, you'd like our audience to take away.
Yeah, so sure, you know, it's important to create a remote working policy if you don't already have one. I think you need to look at how remote working has or will change your company culture and what the future will look like, and then create ways to support people managers who are now and will continue to support distributed employees that they don't see face to face all the time.
I love it, distributed policy. It's the same question to Paul, who copyrighted the works and activity not a place expression, which I love. Paul, 30 seconds from yourself.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, I believe that the opportunity we have now afforded by COVID is just too good for businesses to pass up, to make some permanent and long-lasting changes to how they do things. And if they take that opportunity, it's clear they can benefit both employees and also the bottom line of the business. So I'd really love to see businesses taking that opportunity.
Brilliant. Guido?
Yeah, Mike, I think I'll talk about the fact that I seen quite recently that Satya Nadella was quoted on the latest Microsoft earning call that in the last 3 months he'd seen 2 years of digital transformation take place. Wow. And what I would like to see is that companies continue with that transformation, because while we were all forced to make the change, I think that most of us can see the positives of some of those changes.
Fabulous. And Phil, congratulations, 10 years in, superb. What a great team you've got, what a great firm. Some closing comments from you, Phil, here before we take everyone over to the digital hangout.
Thanks so much, Mike. I suppose the key message for me, look, is that the technology is now more than ready for secure remote working. And in many cases, your business probably already has it in place. It just needs to be scaled out to more users.
Brilliant. So look, here's everyone's details here, folks. Reach out to on LinkedIn. Their inbox is always open. If you fire up, there's lots of stuff happening today. We got some more CWSI sessions. I don't know if you got a slide for it there, John.
We do indeed.
Yeah, there we go. So no, we've got coming up after here, we've got a further session on inaction and in the markets for CWSI. We've got a great program of events. Lash over to dillo.tv/events and pick all them up. If you go to this now, if you join me now on dillo.tv/MTD, we can meet the panelists and hang out and take your questions there. Guys, I've really enjoyed that, and I'll see you over in the hangout.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Mike.
See you.
Thanks, Mike.